Now the migration has been added successfully. Where did it add the migration? If you go to Solution Explorer, inside our data access, you can see it created a new folder with the name migrations, and it added our migration right there with the timestamp here and the migration name, which is add category table to DB. Along with that, you have application DB context model snapshot. This is the class file that keeps a backup of what exactly has been pushed to the database so far. So it is a tracker of what migrations have been applied and what is the current state of your database. That way EF Core is able to tell if there is any differences. If so, let me push those differences when we will run the update database command. That being said, let's take a look at the migration that was added. In here you can see we have a class file with migration builder and we are adding commands there. You can see it says create table and name, it has the categories name which matches with what we have in our DB set right here. So whatever you give here as the property name will be the default table name. Then we have the list of columns in the table. The first column is the ID column, and you can see EF Core is smart enough that if it's just ID, it sets it up as SQL Server identity column, because of which it will automatically increment its value by 1 when a new record is inserted. Next thing that we see is the name column, and it is of type varchar max because it is a string column. Then we also have constraints on the table which are added automatically because we named the column as ID. It detected that there is a primary key on this table, and let me call this bk_categories, and it's on the ID column. Now with EF Core you need to make sure that every table, when we add a migration, it must have a primary key. If you have not named it as the ID column, and if you named it something else, you would have seen the error that there is no primary key set on the table. We will also see that in the future videos. But right now this migration looks good. But one thing you might be curious is here it's not the SQL language. There is no create command, there is no primary key command or any of that. EF Core does that behind the scene automatically. It knows these mappings, and based on that, it will push the appropriate commands to the SQL Server. How do we push that to SQL Server? For that, we'll have to go again to our Package Manager console, and this time we need to write the command update database. Once you hit and execute the command, it will build again. Everything is successful. It will push this migration to the database. Right now the database does not exist. So the first thing it will do is it will create the database, and then it will apply our migration to the database. Perfect. You can see right here it has completed successfully. You won't see any of things change inside the UI here. So let me switch back to the database and examine how things are right there. We'll switch back to our Explorer and we need to refresh the databases. Now if we scroll down, we will have a Wizlib database, and if we expand it in the tables, we have two tables. First is the categories table, and we have the EF migrations history. Let's examine the migrations history. It will only have one record inside that, which is the migration that was pushed right now. It has the migration name and it has the product version. This way database keep tracks that which migrations have already been applied to the database. Once we add a second migration here, we'll have another record here. Let's examine our categories table. It will have two columns. If we expand this and we go to keys, we have the primary key as well. So you can see how easy it was to create the database and the tables based on our model. This was the first step that we had to learn with the migrations. So now we have completed all the 3 steps of migrations in EF Core. We created the model for category, We added the migration to push it to the database, and finally we applied that migration using Update Database. We will be working more with the migrations in this section, but this was the first and the basic migration that we set up to push our model to the database.